Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to Dev Interrupted. I'm your host, Dan Lines, Linear B COO and co founder. And today I'm joined by Gil Broza, author of the book Deliver Better Results. Welcome to the show, Gil.
Thank you so much for having me here.
It's really cool having you on. And we were just chatting before the show. You're in Toronto, I'm in Rochester, New York. We're actually pretty close to each other. Not too far away, which is awesome.
Right.
Usually I can't say that for people that are coming on the show, but I have seen actually a lot of good stuff happening in Toronto. Some startup companies, that
Mm,
type of thing, which is really cool. So awesome to have you on. Could we start out? We know that you wrote this incredible book. We're going to get
mhm.
into the book,
Okay.
but can we hear a little bit about you, your background, what you're all about, your career,
Mm.
and then we'll dive into the book.
I have been specializing for the past 20 years in helping software leaders deliver better results, hence the name for the book. And they do that by upgrading their organization's way of working. And they achieve sustainable upgrades to their way of working because we work on the three pillars of effective product development: thinking in systems, putting people first, and being intentional about mindset. Like I said, it's been about 20 years. I'm pretty well known in the Agile space. I've worked with about 100 clients since starting my independent practice 15 years ago. And I work primarily with, US, Canada, and Europe, but
That's
I want
awesome.
to help the entire world.
So 15 years ago, you started, you said like independent practice, but like
Independent.
your own business.
Yes, which is intentionally unaffiliated, non certifying, giving my clients the best that they deserve and not just somebody else's ideas.
Very cool. And what did you do before that? Previous to the 15 years ago, you
Yeah.
start your independent business. What happened before that?
Pretty common engineering track. I started as a developer, senior developer, team lead, R&D manager. And it was around that time that I discovered Agile methods. I was so we're talking about like 2000, 2001. I was able to apply them in a couple of companies. And it's then when I realized, I want to help more and more companies rather than stay within the confines of one.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, early 2000s, lots of companies, I think maybe thinking, well, I mean, that may be even the time frame where it's like agile is a little newer, like how do I
Super
do
new.
this? And
Yeah.
then yeah. And so you kind of said, okay, let me go and make this, a career for myself, but I can help many, many people. That's what it sounds like.
Yes, because the realization was that how we work matters. And for the longest time, we had just one way of getting work done, right? The traditional kind of project management approach. And, I sort of happened upon this alternate reality where teams can be collaborative and cross functional and planning frequently. And managers don't have to be bossy. And I realized, there's a lot here and I want to help others.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a ton. And we're gonna have to unpack
Uh-huh.
all of this stuff,
Exactly.
or as much as we can in this podcast. So let's start with this. So your book, Deliver Better Results. Who is your intended audience? Who should read this book?
It is for leaders in software development who need their teams and orgs to work more effectively and efficiently. I've written it so that it's readable and applicable by managers at all levels. Okay, so it is written also for the very busy CTOs and VP engineering. Although I do expect that we'll have all roles and seniorities read it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And can you give us a little bit, I guess, an overview of the book, or some of the like what am I gonna find there in this book?
Okay. So what you're going to find there is a focus on something that actually very little literature focuses on. And it's what I call the value delivery system. It's this part of the company, both contributors and managers, and how they work, all the way from idea to delivery to make technology that benefits the customers. Okay. So it is bigger than a team or a set of teams, and it's smaller than the company. And bigger companies have more than one. The premise is that if you want such a system to deliver better results, basically make a bigger difference to your customers and your business, you have to improve the system, not improve locally, like, a team, an agile team, engineering, product, design, test, but rather improve holistically. And the book provides something that's been missing in our industry, which is a roadmap to improving and optimizing that system.
Oh, that sounds cool.
Yeah, because the industry has offered a bunch of target states, like, Scrum or Safe, right? Without actually saying how
Yep.
you get there, and they may not be right for you, right? The industry has offered practices that you should copy because some big player uses them. But of course, the big players use different things, right? So which one should you take? It has offered leadership models, it's offered continuous improvement retrospectives, but not a roadmap to holistic improvement. So what I offer there is really two kinds of things. One is how do leaders behave and speak and enable and support in order to make improvement possible and sustainable? And the second thing is a set of 10 strategies, sequential and incremental, to get there.
That's awesome. And in terms of the audience, again, is there a certain size company or size product engineering team that would benefit most from the book?
No, it's actually useful for all sizes. And the reason is that even the very big, right, they have several of those systems in there. They might be a product line, they might be some form of vertical, a program. They're organized in such a way that they already manage their scale. The thing is, within that, what do you focus your improvements on? So for instance, you can go to the head of engineering and try to improve all of engineering, even though it crosses multiple systems. And sometimes you get some problems with that. So the book is, one system at a time. For most
Mm,
companies, that's anywhere between 10 people and like a couple hundred. But if you have, I don't know, 1,000 people, for sure you're going to have several of those value delivery systems, for sure.
gotcha. So it sounds like when you've done this and what the book prescribes, you also said you've done this at a few companies.
Oh yeah.
It seems like you do maybe like small chunks of teams or like system by system. Is that the way to go through the change management process?
Yes, it is. So the first thing you need to do is actually understand where the boundaries go. And one really easy way to think about this, and again, for all of our listeners, everybody is working in one specific system. To think of your product or solution as if it were a movie, and think to the end where the credit roll is, and say, well, who contributes to this movie? Who makes decisions? Who enables? This whole list of people. That is the scope you're working with. So it's both ACs and their managers. It's not going to correspond neatly to the org chart. People will report to different managers. That's okay. But everybody's decisions affect other people's decisions. That's a system. And
Mhm.
therefore, you have to improve things holistically. And by the way, chances are a lot of our audience uses the term value stream. That is the closest thing to this. My concerns with this term, just based on what I've seen, is that it connotes that work flows only one way, kind of like it did in Waterfall. But
Yep.
then realistically, when you think about stuff happening in the system, which is again, it all boils down to decision making. Decisions have ramifications throughout the system and not just in a linear fashion. So there is a stream here and that work keeps coming in and we keep delivering. But what happens inside is more like a network than a stream.
That's really interesting. I definitely agree. When I think of stream, I think one way, right?
Right.
Value stream. I'm creating something, I'm just sending it out, it's done.
Yeah.
Much more complicated than that.
Or some
Uh,
would say even complex, right? Because it's really hard to predict all the results of actions. And so the book really encourages readers to take a system thinking approach, not in the sense that everybody should be able to draw, all sorts of causal loop diagrams and this and that. No, just think, beyond your immediate scope. If you decide X or you decide Y, what might be the ramifications? How might things in the system, people's behaviors, choices, whatever, compound your change or fight it? That's basic system thinking, right? So there's reinforcing, right? And there's balancing. Or in other words, you might get vicious loops, vicious cycles, all sorts of things that can hamper your efforts. So just think about that.
okay. So before we dive in more,
Mhm.
I do want to let the audience know, Gil, you're offering our listeners the book's first chapter
Yes.
for free.
Yes.
It's called The Big Picture.
Right.
And I just have a little blurb on it. It sounds like it's a concise presentation of the main ideas and advice in the book for our listeners, and I'm sure we'll include this in our links. To receive that chapter, go to heardonpodcast.deliverbetterresultsbook.com. Of course, we'll include that information. Did what we just cover here outline kind of that first chapter? Is there anything else to say kind of about that big picture to
Right.
start there?
Yes. So that chapter actually has more things. It's written in such a way that, like, if you want to hand the book to your boss and you want your boss to read this, the boss says, I don't have time. Because I just
Yeah.
read chapter 1. It's 20 minutes. You'll know the main things. So, for instance, one of those things is that when we want to deliver better results, what we're really targeting is for the system to work better. And what we're hoping to increase is the system's fitness for purpose. How well does it help the company achieve its mission and objectives? And it turns out that there are 5 levels that systems go through. In real life, this is not some academic theory. This is based on observations. And that in order to choose which strategies to apply, you need to know what your current level of fitness is. And that chapter has a quick assessment intentionally designed to take 10 minutes or less. So busy people do it. It doesn't require metrics or big surveys or big consulting or anything like that. And it's also not really gameable usefully. And so you assess your current level, and that shows you which strategies to employ, and you're off to the races. The rest of the book digs into that and gives you specifics and ideas and whatnot without prescribing anything.
That's really cool, actually, because what was on my mind is, we talked about the system, we talked it's a network, we talked maybe it's a little complex.
Yeah.
Like, how do I identify like my current state? Do you have a process that I can go through to even like think about that?
Absolutely. And I've really taken pains to explain this in the simplest language possible, right? Because I'll tell you this, almost every treatment of system thinking that I have come across, it got really technical and jargon heavy, and it felt like a lot very quickly, right? If our listeners take something away from this is, again, look beyond your immediate scope, right? If you just try to improve engineering or just try to improve product, or you let teams do their own like retros and continuous improvement and whatnot, you run the risk of things not really sticking, the changes don't stick, or you get unintended consequences, or you just get too much business risk. Okay. So you want to understand the boundaries. You want to have this coalition of leaders who care about the system and want to improve it. Okay. So like in a smaller environment, it might be VP Eng and VP product. In others, it might be a bunch of directors. It varies. And for them to kind of work from a model, and the book presents a model that they can follow, as opposed to saying,
That's
hey, I heard Scrum's awesome, we should do Scrum. Or in my previous company, we did SAFe, we should do SAFe. No, this does not prescribe anything, but it gives you ideas and explains why things kind of go the way they do and what might improve them.
That's really cool. One of the things that I always think about our listeners, so the people listening to our podcast, is I have my career on my mind.
Mm.
How will this help my career? Is this for me? Like, everyone wants to have a great career journey,
Of course.
and it's wonderful to do that. How do you think this book relates to someone that's interested in improving their career?
Okay, so I treat every reader of the book as what I call an improvement leader. And what this is, it really goes back to one responsibility that leaders have. And by leader, it can be really anyone from team lead or scrum master or coach all the way to C-level. And, you're already supposed to manage people, objectives, budgets, planning, execution, whatnot. But something that we don't talk about enough is to improve how work gets done, right? So that you achieve more for the company, given what you have. And sometimes that is in the blind spot due to inertia. Sometimes it's just kind of narrowly defined as, look for efficiencies. and which is not the best lens in which to view product development anyway. Sometimes we look for automation or AI or whatever, but this will give you the language and the models and the advice to carry out that responsibility effectively. And this will help your career because your company will get more from you. You will be a lot more valuable for your employer, for your client, in the sense that you're able to achieve more without compromising, the team's health or your future delivery, things like that.
Yeah, that's really nice. And I think also, if it sounds like to me, if you're interested in improving your career, you're reading this book, it's taking this holistic look at your system. I mean, even going through that assessment can probably give you a little bit of an understanding,
Yes,
I assume, what's working, maybe what's not working, that type of thing.
yes,
Which I always find is like a great exercise, regardless of any leadership position that you're in, probably going to help you out a little bit.
yes. And one super important thing is that we want to manage the whole. But usually when we work, work never stops. There's always more to do, always more planning, always more this and that. It's very easy to lose sight of some things. So for instance, we might be, I don't know, leading an engineering team and really taking a lot of interest in our delivery metrics. Nothing wrong with that, but it's only one part of the picture. What about,
Mhm.
are our deliveries making a difference to people? Or to what extent do they do that? No, you might say, well, that's not my responsibility. That's product. Well, but product needs you to succeed and you need product to succeed. So maybe you should talk to them and come up with something that matters to both of you. That's really the angle this book takes.
That's really interesting. I want to dive in
Sure.
there. So we're talking about engineering and product relationship.
Yeah,
One of the most, I think, also complex
of course.
relationships. What have you seen there? Are some of the pitfall, like you've worked with
Oh, yeah.
companies, like, or what are the like common issues you see with that communication?
Right. So those relationships are all over the place, right? The relationship I see most commonly is the order taking relationship. Engineering does what product wants them to do. Another relationship I see a lot is kind of being afraid to raise issues and not wanting to be seen as a troublemaker. Another one is really kind of let specialists do their thing. So let product do their product thing and let engineers do their engineering thing. And
Yeah.
without realizing that nobody's choices are entirely context free or ramification free, right? Again, system. So I can tell you where I've been where results were really, really great. There are some things the leaders did. One of them is that the engineering leaders and the product leads, they took shared responsibility, not just for what will we deliver, but how will we get better at doing it. They spoke to each other frequently. They had trust. They collaborated to some extent. They made it possible for everyone in their respective groups to own things, not just in theory, but actually own things. And also made it possible for them to speak with other people in the system who were dependent on that. Okay. A counter example to that is from way back before I started, kind of coaching in Agile context. I was leading a server development team, and my manager was awesome in terms of, empowering me to do things. I mean, this goes back a long time. But if I needed anything from the front end team, I had to go through the channels. I had to go up the hierarchy. He would talk to his counterparts and he would talk to his people. And seriously, these people were sitting across the hallway from me. That made no sense. In product, nobody even talked to them. They just gave us documents, right? Now, this is, of course, old school, but I see the same dynamic continue to play out these days still. And part of it is the pressure that everybody's under. The race to be dominant has not relented. We get more things. Hey, AI now, right? But the race just got harder. Okay. And so we still need to remember that what our customers care about is not how we divide work internally. They don't care who does what. They don't care who reports to whom. They care that the thing works and does the job it's meant to do and that doesn't upset them and all of that stuff. And those are not just product management calls, UX calls, and engineering calls. It's everybody's calls, including the VP who deprioritized something.
Yeah. The way that you describe it there definitely has me thinking about the system, how every decision and how it impacts. And, if the decision making is only one directional, product tells engineering everything to do. Obviously, that's not a great situation to be in because engineering has a ton of context of their own. I can see that, I've experienced that before. I've seen that happen as well. I wanted to ask you a little bit more of like some of these other, I guess, pitfalls or like what not to do. What do you see maybe most often leaders are getting wrong?
Like in terms of, unlocking organizational potential? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to start with my pet peeve. Okay. Something I've written about plenty. I think it's in every one of my 4 books. And that is, people are not resources. Repeat after me. Do not call people resources. Now, I know a lot of people say, what's the big deal? I mean, we know they're people, right? It's just a word, but it's not a word because it reflects how we think. So when we talk about, hey, I got 5 devs, you got 3, can we trade? We're not thinking of them as people. We're thinking of them as units of labor. And when, by extension, the entire company works this way, then you're really looking for, labor for results as opposed to basically our last remaining, advantage over the AI we're building, which is we can think and reason and generalize and collaborate and come up with new things. So it's not just about, turning requirements into deliveries. There's something greater going on here. So that's one thing.
That's a great one.
Yes. And also, by the way, as long as people are resources, then the whole thing that we say about, collaboration or trust or safety, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's dehumanizing.
Yes. And everybody sees through that. And, the whole concept of psychological safety entered the discourse 10, 15 years ago. It's still not entirely there, but everybody has always felt it. Okay. And nowadays, I think things are a little better, but not enough. So, okay. Another thing is, and that goes back to work I did a few years ago on mindset. And I know a lot of people kind of either see it as a vague thing or they look at it as, it's just psychobabble. But the way I explain mindset is it's your choice making. So when you do something, there are certain principles and guidelines in the back of your mind that guide how you approach the work, right? So for instance, let's say you need to produce a spec. You can do this collaboratively, or you can do this totally on your own. You can be perfectionist about it. You can take your time, whatever it is. All those are principles that guide you. And what happens in organizations, for the most part, is that they don't have an explicit and intentional mindset choice making, right? They do stuff and they have processes and procedures and tactics, but they don't articulate clearly enough how they want people approaching them so that they act harmoniously and not work at cross purposes, and that they get the results that they want. So for instance, as a senior leader, I can say, look, I think we will be more successful if we're more collaborative. That's a mindset type of setting statement. But I also want to act on it in terms of assigning work and checking progress and metrics and a whole bunch of stuff. Okay. And so if you want to deliver better, one very basic thing you need to do is basically define how do we want to be around here? Not at the level of psychobabble, but at the level of what are we optimizing for? Are we optimizing for innovation or prediction? You got to choose, right? And a lot of companies say, yeah, well, of course, we need innovation, but then you look at how they actually plan and what they actually do and how they actually talk. No, they're optimizing for prediction.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because it's cool to say, yeah, we're
Of course,
innovative.
it has to be.
We're all
Yeah,
innovative.
or we're
right?
collaborative.
If you're not innovative, you're looked down upon.
Or, you wouldn't say, no, we want silos here. We want to utilize people 150%. We want everybody busy. No, the cool thing to say is, no, we collaborate. We tap into everybody's wisdom. But what matters is what you actually do And then from this, you can infer, reverse engineer the principles and values that guide all of those behaviors and choices. And then you can say, no, you're actually favoring individual work. That will get you some things, of course. It will not get you the effects of collaboration if that's what you're after.
I think the mindset thing is always, like you brought it up, it's a tough one because it sounds very soft
Yeah.
or maybe out there. But also what we're saying is it leads to a lot of depending on what the organization's mindset is, we're making decisions every single,
Yes.
I don't know, hour,
Yeah.
minute, second. And, I think this was your second pitfall. Like either maybe it's not having a harmonious mindset or not everyone in the same
Congruence. Yeah.
direction of mindset.
Yes.
And I do want to ask you about other pitfalls, but if we just stay on this for one more
Sure.
minute, I always think it's one of the hardest things to get everyone thinking the same way. And I'm just wondering if there's about anything, software development,
Yes.
anything really. Do you have any tips between a product engineering company organization that helps with that? Once you have the mindset that you want, like, how do I actually roll that out?
Yeah. Well, it's actually what I do for a living, right? I mean, that's a lot of what I do for clients. It's actually not that hard, but it's something that has been in the blind spot forever. It's something
Yeah.
that gets lost because we're always busy executing. It gets lost because we really have this mentality of copying what other people did that was successful or copying what we did at our previous employer. And we go for best practices and whatnot. And we forget context. And we forget that copying things superficially doesn't tell us how they were executed. Okay. So in terms of making this happen, so you start by making things explicit. Hopefully you involve your team. It's not just top down. And the second thing is you keep looking at what you say and don't say, what you do and don't do, what you reward and punish, what messages you're sending people through all of this. And you say, does this support what I want to accomplish? For instance, if one of our choices is we want to be collaborative, look at how you engage in team meetings and one-on-ones, how you put plans together and say, well, are we collaborating here? Are we collaborating enough for now? Or are we really just going, person by person? And that will give you the feedback you need. And so you can basically start building good habits around acting on what you want there to be. But it starts by being explicit. And in a lot of companies, they don't have that.
I'm going to go through this assessment in your book and understand my system and my network
Yes.
a bit, right? And then eventually I'm going to need to go take action and make
Yes.
change, right? I'll probably understand my system is not perfect and I want to do something about it. Have you found that like an engineering leader or a product leader or whoever's kind of taking this initiative can do this on their own, or does it require bringing in like outside resources to help with this change management? Like what have you seen?
Well, look, obviously I am biased because I am the outsider, right? I'm the external one. What I find is that, yes, many leaders can do this on their own. However, first, they're really busy. Second, they're missing a model by which to do this, as opposed to, again, just here's a target state. Take Scrum, do it, right? And third, and that's really one of the value propositions of having a coach or a consultant, it's pointing out to you all the stuff that you have missed, the stuff that you already know, the stuff that is in you. You know to do that and you know it's good, but you have missed it. You have let it lapse or something like that, so that you accomplish what you need to accomplish. Right? I have had wonderful clients. Some of them are like the best enabling leaders I know. And even they have their occasional missteps or they don't quite know what to do. And that's where somebody from the outside really helps. You can do this with internal staff, like internal coaches and whatnot. And what I keep hearing from many companies is, yeah, but, and the but is because I'm internal, they don't pay enough attention to what I say, or they think I'm biased.
Yeah, I think that's a good thank you for sharing that. I think that's like a really honest assessment. What I would say what caught me the most is it's hard to make change when you feel like you don't have time and there's so
Yeah,
much going on and you're trying to deliver in product engineering and you have timelines, but then you're also supposed to get mental space to say, let me look at my system and
it's
make this
hard.
change. That's where I think bringing in someone from the outside that can kind of accelerate that thinking for you to say, hey, I've already done this a bunch of times. Let me
Yes,
like jump you
absolutely.
ahead.
And that's exactly the value proposition I go in with. And it's why I charge what I charge, because I can help you accelerate and reduce the risk. And so, for instance, there is a case study in the book at the end, in one of the appendices, of how I helped a company go from like a really troubled value delivery system. It was a product company, 40, 50 people, all the way to like really good, really, really good in 10 months. Whereas typically in the industry, you would need a couple of years easy. And it wasn't
Yeah.
because of my awesomeness. It was particularly because we did things in a certain sequence. And when they had questions,
Mm.
they got answers as opposed to just rely on what they already knew and calling them out on behaviors and issues. Um, and the other thing that happened there, which was particularly lovely, is that management was so thirsty for learning and just they basically okay, they didn't entirely say it this way, but it was like, tell us what to do and we'll do it. And I'm not of the telling kind. I don't want to prescribe what's right for you because you're going to have to live with it, not me. But through a bunch of coaching techniques and whatnot, we came up with suggestions, and they just went ahead and did them. And so when you have this type of willingness, and when they care enough about the thing, you can move really fast. So then what remains is that you actually work from a model that gives you a good roadmap, as opposed to kind of meandering, like, let's just do a whole lot of team retrospectives and eventually we'll be great. No, you won't. Okay. It will be locally optimized.
That's really cool. What I like what you said is there's almost like a step by step to go through instead of kind of like, okay, everyone do a retro, keep doing these retros. Eventually, it will work
Yeah.
out like for the better. That's the point of a retro. We get better after it. Yeah, I've seen it work. Over maybe a long period of time, or if you have incredible leaders at every single team, which is really hard to do. It sounds like in the book or with your coaching, we get more of this step by step. Is that the 10
Strategies. Yes.
processes
10
that you talk?
strategies.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
so they are kind of stepwise, yes, but they are high level enough. So I don't actually prescribe to you what you should be doing or what that would look like. So just to give you an example, if you assess your system as a level 2, there are two things to do there. One of them is you want to plug holes in decision making. The system whose fitness is at level 2, some decisions are kind of hazy or easily reversed or things like that, and they just need clarity on who makes them and when. The bigger strategy at level 2 is to stabilize the system. So, it has demand and it has supply. The demand is like your roadmap, and the supply is what you deliver. And at level 2, the relationship is kind of erratic. You can't really tell when stuff would come out and in what shape, like with reasonable confidence. And the strategy is to stabilize it, right? To get to a good balance between the two. And I give lots of techniques and tips that have worked from Kanban, from Agile, from whatnot. But it's up to you to choose which ones. And you may find that 3 of them are enough for you, and that 2 of them, they will just never fly, and that's okay.
Yeah. Sounds like there will never be a one size
How can
fits
there
all.
be, right? Our business context is different. Our people are different. The competition is different. Our legacy is different. Everything is different, which is why we're not also resources, right?
Absolutely. Let's go back, and I think we'll have time for one more. I like the
Okay.
pitfalls. Do you have another pitfall? Talk to us
Okay.
about
This
that.
is a juicy one. Let's say you have some performance issues in your team. Let's say you have some behavior issues in your team, or maybe some faults. Somebody brought down production. How do you think of that? The pitfall is, and this is on us as humans, not just as managers or leads. The pitfall is we look for somebody to kind of pin the cause on. I mean, sometimes we go as far as outright blaming, but even if we don't, we want to know like who did this, right? And why did they do it, and all of that. And system thinking will tell you that well north of 90% of what happens in your system is because of the system, not the individuals. So let's say you have somebody on your team who's just being nasty to their colleagues, let's say, okay? It's so easy to just say, well, that's their personality. They're a difficult person, whatever. Or maybe, I don't know, they didn't get the training, okay? If we take a system thinking approach, we might say, well, what is it about the systems that they inhabit, which are their team, their functional group, their family, their community, their neighborhood, their city? Those are things we don't know much about, but they are there. How are they affecting their behavior? So without even getting, to psychological stuff, like, what happened to them as kids, and what were their parents like? We're not even going there. But what we're saying is, how is that person responding to something that's happening around them? And maybe what's happening around them is that they get tasks that they find boring and basic, whereas somebody else gets the really juicy and interesting ones, and that someone else is gonna get the bonus, the promotion, the treatment, the whatnot. And so the person who's being nasty is trying to kind of look, I don't know, more important or more impactful, because they can't do this through the tasks they're working on. So it's not a matter of personality. If they ended up in the right position, maybe instead of being a developer, they need to be a test engineer. I don't know. But there are contexts in which they would shine. So it's not like they're inherently broken. So the takeaway here is attribute to the system before attributing to the individual.
Got it. Now it makes perfect sense why we need to start with the assessment of the
Yes.
system in chapter 1. No, that's actually really cool, because that is like I think a pretty juicy topic. It's easy to say, well, that person, they're just a jerk. No, it's,
Yeah.
they're just, they've never been easy to get along with. Yeah, usually I think like human behavior, you have all these environmental factors coming onto you, and it creates like an output, whatever it is, whatever that it could be a good output, it could be a bad output.
And
like
it's
you
not
talked
even just
about.
the people, even
Um,
stuff that happens within your process. Let's say a lot of defects escape to production. You might say, well,
mhm.
let's look at how many defects are by developer A and how many defects are developer B, and maybe we have a weak link there. Now, that might be true, not arguing that, but it could also be that defects escape to production because of other things that you do. It could also be the technology you're using. It could be the tests that you write. It could be the go pressure, so we never actually finish things properly. So we might have really good developers who would otherwise do really good work, but in a way they are hamstrung.
Yeah, totally makes sense. All right, Gil, I think we have time, if you have another one, for one more pitfall, and then we're gonna, start wrapping up.
Okay, so I would also say it's really the whole thing about managing in silos, right? So I'm an engineering manager. I manage in my engineering team. I'm an engineering director. I do the same for my set of teams, and same goes for product and whatnot. And yes, that's kind of how the organization is built up, and I get that. But what happens is that people end up, they kind of default to optimizing for themselves, right? We have seen the same behavior with Scrum Masters and Agile coaches who basically say, the organization is not going to go Agile, but I'm going to do the best for my team. I'm going to remove all the impediments so my team can be great. And by implication, I will have done my work. And this is well intended, but it's not helping
Yeah.
us holistically, right? Because you may be optimizing for your one team by, let's say, forging great relationships with people outside the team who you need sometimes, like your staff engineer or I don't know, somebody who kind of helps you kind of move things on occasion. And instead of, getting in line and asking for their time, you kind of get them on the side. But then you're hampering the progress of other teams. And it could be that in the aggregate, you're setting your system back. You mean well, but it's the outcome. And so even though people will continue to have local responsibilities and accountabilities, You want to be really mindful of, are you managing, measuring, incentivizing in the local scope rather than the system scope?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Got it. That's a good one. The last question that I want to ask you. So we talked about your book. We talked about, hey, you can get this first chapter for free. We talked about a bunch of
hmm
pitfalls. Now let's say that I've done my
hmm
system analysis. I decided that I need to make a change. I brought in Gil. Gil came in 10 months later, things have improved. How do you think about sustainability the next 10 months after that or the next year after that? How do I not like fall
Right.
backwards?
So if I have done my job properly, and I like to think I do, then what happens is that your understanding of what to pay attention to is better, right? You pay more attention to the system. You do the assessment frequently because at that point, it really takes you 5 minutes every time you do it. So you can see if there's any backsliding. You have your ears and eyes open so that you know, um, you can watch for signs, right? And signals. You have also, because you've gotten your system to like a really good level of fitness, you have also distributed control. We call this empowerment, right? But you've basically enabled more people to take responsibility and behave and act. And together with them, you're all kind of looking at this thing. Okay. An analogy I can think for this is family, right? It's not the same when you've had your firstborn and the kid's a month old, or you have several kids and they're now in their teens, right? You're in a different spot as a parent. At this point, you kind of know about the warning signs and you know what to look for. That's really the big deal.
Mhm.
Okay. I definitely don't want to create dependence on me as a consultant coach, whatnot. That would not be ethical.
Awesome, Gil. So, is there anything else that we should know about? Anything that you want to say about your book, or any final advice before we sign off here?
Okay. So you asked me about, basically how I help companies. Because I come from the Agile space, there's something that has become a bit of an expectation in this field. And that is that if you need help improving things, you're going to get somebody to kind of live with your team, like embedded coaching or something like that. That if you need help, somebody comes in and spends months with your team, several days a week, maybe occasionally talks to senior management. That's an expensive proposition. Okay. I have a different model. My model is you spread your budget over a much longer period of time so you can have access to me for months, but you only see me, once every 2 weeks, once a month. It kind of gets more spread out as things get better. And it's a different model than what's normal in the space. And I would especially love it in our day and age when, budgets are scarce, that people realize that it's not like either they pay 6 figures for something or they do nothing at all and they stay with their inertia. No, there is a middle ground. And the middle ground is super affordable and it makes a big difference. It's like I have a leadership advisory service, stuff like that.
That's really cool, and thanks for sharing that model. It's definitely a different style model than I'm used to, and it's a little bit refreshing.
Yeah,
Let's say to hear.
I mentioned the example with that company went from, troubled to really great. I spent a total of 30 half days with them, with the entire company over practically a year. 30 half
Yeah.
days because we work online, after doing some initial training and an initial assessment, and that was it. Because I work mostly with leaders, and so, things don't move on a daily basis at that level.
Yeah, I love that you have the cost
Yeah.
in mind, the long-term
Yeah.
efficiency in mind. And Gil, thanks so much for joining us today and sharing all of, some of that. I know we only got to like some of
Yeah.
it, but some of the knowledge that you have. And I highly recommend that everyone goes and checks out Gil's book. Where can listeners find your
So
book?
it's sold pretty much everywhere, both electronically and in print. For people who are not keen on paying Amazon, there's Barnes and Noble. The digital formats are everywhere. You can get them on my website.
Excellent. And listeners, if you haven't yet, consider checking out our Dev Interrupted YouTube channel to watch this episode and tons of behind the scenes content. Thank you everyone for listening. And Gil, again, thanks for coming
My
on the
pleasure.
pod.
Thank you so much.